And welcome, I'm Andy Miocha and you're watching A News. Here are the headlines. More than 1,000 people perish in Syria as clashes between security forces and Assad loyalists continue. At least 25 people killed in Ukraine in the latest wave of Russian attacks, Ukrainian officials say. Faithful gather outside hospital to pray for Pope Francis as he remains under medical care for double pneumonia. Thank you for tuning in. More than 1,000 people have been killed in Syria as heavy clashes continue between security forces and loyalists of ousted President Bashar al-Assad in the deadliest spike of violence since Assad's fall. Damascus claims it regained control of most of the areas.
Fighting erupted in Syria this week as Assad loyalists clashed with security forces, leading to one of the deadliest escalations in years. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says over 750 civilians have been killed, along with 125 government security forces and nearly 150 militants linked to Assad supporters. The violence followed the former president's removal 3 months ago, with tensions still running high. Government forces claim they have regained control of most affected areas, but the situation remains fragile. The Syrian Defense Ministry says roads have been closed to prevent further attacks, while security officials report arrests of looters and the recovery of stolen vehicles. Meanwhile, hospital attacks in Latakia and Tartus have left several dead, prompting officials to call the strikes a crime against humanity. With no sign of an immediate resolution, concerns are growing over further instability in the region.
At least 25 people were killed across several regions of Ukraine in the latest wave of Russian aerial attacks, according to Ukrainian officials. In the meantime, Moscow claims to have successfully intercepted Ukrainian drones.
Ukrainian officials report that Russian strikes have intensified in recent days. The deadliest attack occurred in Donetsk region on Saturday. Ukrainian authorities claim at least 11 people were killed, and 40 others, including 6 children, were wounded. In addition to Donetsk, Ukrainian officials say that Russian missile and drone strikes have hit homes and critical infrastructure in Kharkiv and Odessa regions. Local officials also claim that rescue operations were disrupted when Russia reportedly launched a second strike, deliberately targeting emergency responders. The attack in Donetsk saw 2 ballistic missiles hit residential buildings and a shopping center in the town of Dobropilya late Friday, killing at least 11 people. Other attacks in the region killed 9 people and wounded 13 on Friday and Saturday, according to local officials. In Bohoduhiv, Kharkiv region, a drone strike reportedly killed 3 people and wounded 7. The Odessa region has faced repeated attacks on its energy infrastructure, with local authorities claiming that this was the 7th attack on the region's power system in just 3 weeks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned these actions, emphasizing that such attacks reflect Russia's unchanged goals. However, Moscow claims it successfully intercepted 88 Ukrainian drones overnight, with no major casualties reported.
Protesters gathered near the White House in Washington to unveil what they say is the world's largest Ukrainian flag and to call U.S. President Donald Trump to stand with Kyiv. Around 1,000 people chanting "Stand with Ukraine" and "Russia must pay" unfurled a massive blue and yellow flag measuring 52 by 33 meters. The demonstration comes after Trump halted U.S. military aid to Kyiv, accusing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky of not taking peace talks with Russia seriously.
It's a way to really represent and support Ukraine, because even though people bring like smaller flags from like even buildings and stuff, it's right now like people can see how like tight and close Ukrainian people are and American people are, and that not only Ukrainian people come here to like show support to Ukraine, but also from United States and Polish people and a lot of Eastern European people that live here. So I think it's just a bigger way to show support for Ukraine.
France will provide Ukraine with 195 million euros worth military aid funded through interest from frozen Russian assets, the country's armed forces minister told La Tribune Dimanche. The package includes artillery shells and air-to-ground bombs for Mirage 2000 jets already delivered to Ukraine. France will also expedite delivery of light tanks and armored vehicles. The minister said France will ramp up production of military equipment to support Ukraine and its own military, doubling the production of fighter jets, anti-tank missiles and air-to-ground bombs by 2026. Since the start of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, some 260 billion euros of Russian central bank assets have been frozen internationally. The G7 nations plan to provide Ukraine with $50 billion from interest generated by these assets, with Kyiv not being required to repay these funds until it receives reparations from Moscow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to visit Saudi Arabia on Monday for talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. A Ukrainian delegation is expected to hold talks with their American counterparts a day later. Ross Cullen brings more on that from Kyiv.
Well, Volodymyr Zelensky will be traveling to Saudi Arabia on Monday for one-on-one talks with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and Volodymyr Zelensky saying that Ukraine has been seeking peace from the very first second of this war. Realistic proposals are on the table. The key is to move quickly and effectively. Now, there are two key meetings to focus on. The first one, as I mentioned, is between Mohammed bin Salman and Volodymyr Zelensky. But traveling with the Ukrainian president will be a delegation made up of the Ukrainian foreign minister, the defense minister, the president's chief of staff and deputy chief of staff, and they will be staying on in Saudi Arabia for talks on Tuesday with an American delegation representing the US government. It's important to say that Volodymyr Zelensky will not be attending those peace talks with the US delegation on Tuesday. We know that Washington has made no secret how dissatisfied it is with the leadership of Volodymyr Zelensky, and there is an attempt now here in Ukraine to try to ensure a reset of the dialogue between Washington and Kyiv after that disastrous White House meeting between President Trump, Vice President Vance and President Zelensky in Washington some 9 days ago. Now, the delegation meetings on Tuesday, those face-to-face talks, will be an attempt for Kyiv to try to show that it has serious suggestions about a possible truce that has been proposed by Volodymyr Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron, potentially a ceasefire, and how a lasting peace looks going forward. They will be meeting with the representatives of the Trump administration, likely Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Middle East Envoy Stephen Witkoff. And there has been an attempt over the last few days by Ukraine to ensure there is maximum alignment between Ukraine and Europe. We've seen Volodymyr Zelensky attending the Special European Union Summit on Thursday. On Saturday, the British National Security Advisor was in the Ukrainian capital for further discussions, and so there will also be an opportunity for Ukraine to present to the United States what they hope is an aligned position by Ukraine and Europe with realistic proposals for peace to try to bring this war to a close and to try to ensure that Ukraine is backed by the United States in trying to end this conflict. Ross Cullen, A News in Kyiv.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, accused the U.S. of bullying tactics a day after Donald Trump said he had sent a letter to the country's top authority to negotiate a nuclear deal. Delivering a speech in Tehran, Khamenei said the aim of Washington's offer for negotiations was domination rather than problem solving. Trump had earlier reinstated the maximum pressure campaign that was applied during his first term to isolate Iran from the global economy and drive its oil exports to zero. In 2018, Trump withdrew the U.S. from a deal between Iran and major powers that placed limits on Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. After Trump reimposed sanctions, Iran breached and far surpassed those limits.
مسئله هسته‌ای فقط نیست که حالا راجع به مسائل هسته‌ای صحبت کنن.
The issue isn't just the nuclear issue that they're talking about now. They'll raise new demands, and these new demands will certainly not be met by Iran. Regarding the country's defensive capabilities, regarding the country's international influence.
توانایی‌های بین‌المللی کشور.
Don't do this, don't meet that person, don't go to that place, don't produce that thing. Your missile's range shouldn't exceed such and such a distance. Can anyone accept these things? This is what negotiation is for.
مذاکره برای این چیزا.
An armed man was shot by the U.S. Secret Service near the White House after a confrontation and is now in a local hospital. U.S. President Donald Trump was not in the residence at the time. Secret Service said it received a tip on Saturday that a suicidal person may have traveled to Washington from Indiana, and the person's car was found a block from the White House. After being identified, the man brandished a gun as officers approached him, and shots were fired shortly after midnight local time. Major Western donors are cutting back on international development funding. While the Trump administration's abrupt dismantling of U.S. aid has drawn the most attention, The Economist reports on a broader global pullback from foreign aid.
Well, it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
The Trump administration's characterization of USAID as a criminal organization run by radical lunatics may sound extreme, but according to The Economist, it reflects a growing skepticism about foreign aid that extends well beyond American politics. The Economist notes that while Trump's approach is unusually and needlessly chaotic, other Western nations are following similar paths. Britain under Prime Minister Keir Starmer is cutting its aid budget by 40% to boost defence spending. France's minority government plans to reduce aid by more than a third this year, and Germany is also trimming back its commitments. This global retreat from aid isn't just about budget constraints. It reflects mounting questions about effectiveness. The Economist points out that after more than 60 years and hundreds of billions of dollars, the benefits of foreign aid have been mixed at best. Where aid has worked, according to their analysis, is in global health programs and humanitarian relief. Donor-funded vaccines and clinics have helped reduce child mortality rates in Africa by 3/4 since the 1960s. American-financed antiretroviral drugs cut AIDS deaths by half in the 2 decades to 2020. But The Economist emphasizes that such life-saving interventions account for only about 1/4 of total aid flows. Much of the remaining funding goes toward infrastructure and economic assistance, areas where results have been disappointing. If the aim is to boost growth, it is not working, the magazine states, noting that African real incomes per person have barely increased in 3 decades. The publication identifies several fundamental problems with traditional development aid. It tends to be statist, with efforts to pick industrial winners rarely succeeding. In some countries, aid has enabled government waste by covering essential services while officials spend on vanity projects. And contrary to popular belief, The Economist argues that aid rarely buys meaningful soft power. In some countries, aid dependency has become entrenched. The magazine reports that in Malawi's 60 years of independence, Malawians have had more spent on them by aid agencies than by their own government. Meanwhile, fiscal pressures on donor countries are intensifying. With aging populations requiring more spending on pensions and healthcare, plus growing security concerns, particularly in Europe, where The Economist estimates EU members may need to double defense budgets to counter Russia, foreign aid is increasingly seen as a luxury. Rather than abandoning aid entirely, The Economist suggests focusing on programs that demonstrably work, particularly in health. They propose 3 guiding principles: leveraging governments' unique coordinating capabilities, addressing information gaps the public can't easily assess, and funding causes with positive global spillovers, such as preventing the spread of infectious diseases. Trump's approach, according to the publication, fails to follow these principles. His cuts have affected effective programs as much as wasteful ones, and some officials view aid primarily as a tool for securing political favors. As Western aid declines, The Economist notes that non-Western donors like China and the United Arab Emirates are unlikely to fill the gap, as they tend to prioritize infrastructure and political advantage over humanitarian concerns. The magazine concludes that while the transition will be painful, particularly for the poorest countries, the old era is not coming back. Governments in developing nations must now strengthen their own institutions and implement growth-friendly reforms as they become masters of their own destiny.
Canadian police are searching for 3 suspects after a shooting at a Toronto pub left at least 12 people injured. Officials say the suspects, armed with an assault rifle and handguns, entered the pub and opened fire indiscriminately. Their motive remains unknown. The victims range in age from their 20s to 50s. 6 people suffered gunshot wounds. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow said in a social media post all necessary resources are being deployed in the investigation. Thousands of Israelis marched in Tel Aviv on Saturday, demanding urgent action to secure a hostage deal with Hamas. Protesters gathered outside the Defense Ministry and at Hostage Square, calling for the release of remaining captives. Israel and Hamas signaled progress in ceasefire talks, with Hamas citing positive indicators, and Israel set to send a delegation to Doha on Monday. Meanwhile, a Hamas delegation is in Cairo, working with mediators on securing the continuation of the truce. Thousands took to the streets of Belgrade on Saturday in another anti-government protest. Workers from various sectors joined students demanding justice after a deadly train station roof collapse in Novi Sad last November that claimed 15 lives. Many blamed the disaster on corruption linked to Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić and his Serbian Progressive Party. They also accused the government of ties to organized crime and suppressing media freedoms. Vučić and his allies denied these allegations. The government says it started an anti-corruption drive after the train station disaster, arresting dozens on corruption charges. More than 500,000 passengers are expected to face major disruptions on Monday, as a 24-hour strike will bring several German airports to a standstill. The strike, called by trade union Verdi, will impact thousands of flights.
The Association of Germany's Airport Operators, ADV, has reported that around 510,000 passengers will be affected, with more than 3,400 flights set to be cancelled due to the strike. This latest industrial action marks a significant escalation after Verdi staged multiple walkouts last month. Frankfurt Airport, Germany's busiest hub, has announced that there will likely be no departures throughout the day. Authorities have urged passengers to avoid coming to the airport and advise those with connecting flights to check their airline's website for updates. Other major airports impacted include Munich, Hamburg and Berlin. Germany's air traffic control operator, DFS, has confirmed that it will not be directly affected by the strike, but the disruption is still expected to be severe. Verdi has called for the strike as part of its push for an 8% wage increase, or a minimum of €350 more per month, along with improved bonuses and additional time off. The decision to strike follows a failed second round of collective bargaining last month. Employers, however, have rejected the union's demands, calling them unaffordable. Negotiations between the two sides are set to continue later this month. But for now, air travel across Germany faces a significant standstill. Passengers are strongly advised to stay informed about their flights and consider alternative travel arrangements.
Pope Francis continued his therapies and met with 2 top aides who informed him about various situations in the church and in the world, the Vatican has said. People gathered near the hospital where the pontiff is being treated to pray and leave messages.
Faithful gathered outside Rome's Gemelli Hospital on Sunday, praying for Pope Francis as he remains under medical care for double pneumonia. The Vatican says he is showing a good response to treatment, but doctors remain cautious about his recovery. The Pope, known for his tireless work ethic, has continued official duties from his hospital suite, signing documents and appointing staff. However, for the fourth consecutive week, he will deliver his Angelus prayer in writing instead of appearing in St. Peter's Square.
He is a 90-year-old person. There will be no more progress. We only have to hope that he lives and that they take him away so that he can live a decent life. Here, he is not living a decent life.
Despite the uncertainty, messages of hope and support continue to grow outside the hospital. Candles, handwritten notes and images of Pope Francis surround a statue of the late Pope John Paul II, reflecting the deep affection many feel for him.
The condition has been quite worrying, so we are here hoping. It's an elderly person's health condition, and there's a morbid status that goes with it. We can only hope. For sure, there is enormous affection.
As Pope Francis's health remains fragile, the faithful continue their prayers, hoping for his recovery.
New York has declared a state of emergency as brush fires forced evacuations and shut down a major highway. 4 wildfires broke out near the Hamptons, a wealthy area on Long Island. Firefighters are battling the flames with air support from National Guard helicopters. NASA satellite imagery shows fire and smoke stretching roughly 4 kilometers along the Sunrise Highway. High winds intensified the fires, forcing the evacuation of a military base. The cause of the blaze remains unknown. No injuries have been reported. At least 13 people have been killed in devastating floods that struck the Argentine port city of Bahia Blanca. Torrential rain forced more than 1,200 residents to leave their homes, and large parts of the city have been left without electricity. Roads and bridges were destroyed, and footage shows cars piled up after being swept up by the floodwater. On Friday, more than 400 millimeters of rain fell on Bahia Blanca, which is a third of the average total rainfall every year. Tropical cyclone Alfred has left a trail of destruction across Australia's east coast, causing severe flooding and widespread power outages for hundreds of thousands. Although the storm weakened before making landfall, it still claimed 1 life and left many injured, including 12 soldiers.
After 16 days of activity, tropical cyclone Alfred made landfall near Brisbane on Saturday, downgrading to a tropical low. Despite the weakening of its winds, the storm unleashed heavy rainfall, leading to widespread flooding across Queensland and New South Wales. The cyclone marked the first such event in 51 years, but did not bring the destructive winds initially feared. Queensland's southeast region, including the Gold Coast, has been the hardest hit, with over 300,000 people still without power. Prime Minister confirmed the death of a man in New South Wales and warned of ongoing severe weather.
That the situation in Queensland and northern New South Wales remains very serious due to flash flooding and heavy winds. Heavy rainfall, damaging wind gusts and coastal surf impacts are expected to continue over coming days. I urge everyone to continue to listen carefully to the emergency authorities. Tragically, last night it was confirmed a 61-year-old man has died in floodwaters near Dorrigo in New South Wales. Our thoughts are with his loved ones and the community at this heartbreaking time.
Residents are voicing concerns about trees uprooted by the storm.
Yeah, she fell right on top of the power line. It's just touching it. Really hoping that the tree stays where it is and doesn't fall any further.
So we actually manage the caravan park across the road here, and we've just realised that we've got 2 big trees have come down and pulled fencing up and things, so we'll spend most of the day assessing that and trying to clean that up.
Authorities are working around the clock to restore power and assist affected communities. However, a convoy of 12 Australian soldiers helping with the efforts crashed, injuring several. They are expected to recover. Brisbane Airport reopened on Sunday but warned that weather could affect the schedule. Officials are yet to decide whether to reopen the 1,000 schools closed due to the weather.
The Netflix show Drive to Survive returns with Season 7, bringing fresh insight into the world of Formula One. This time, Baku gets the spotlight as the series explores its Grand Prix.
Netflix has officially dropped Season 7 of Drive to Survive, and this time, Azerbaijan takes center stage. The latest season of the hit Formula One documentary captures the intensity of the 2024 season, from Max Verstappen's relentless title chase to Red Bull's dominance and fierce rivalries on the grid. But beyond the racetrack, the camera zoom in on Baku, showcasing the Azerbaijan Grand Prix against the backdrop of the city's striking blend of history and modernity. For the first time, Drive to Survive expands beyond the pit lane, highlighting Azerbaijan's landscapes, cultural heritage and the dramatic Baku city circuit, one of the most unpredictable tracks on the calendar.
I would just love to.
Known for its high-speed straights and unforgiving corners, the circuit plays a pivotal role in the season's unfolding drama. More than just racing, the series brings viewers closer to the spectacle of Formula One while offering a deeper look at the country hosting one of its most exciting events.
The stakes are high. Christian's Red Bull is struggling, but if McLaren are to take the lead in the
The release comes just ahead of the 2025 season opener in Australia from March 14 to 16, with the next Azerbaijan Grand Prix scheduled for September 19 to 21.
And Formula One goes racing on
the Baku city circuit will again test drivers on its tight streets, promising another thrilling race in the capital. Drive to Survive is now streaming on Netflix.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.